Hello there. In this video, you'll learn how to facilitate a group feedback session with your team. Running a group feedback session with your team is one of the most powerful ways that you can improve performance and build a high-performing team. Yes, you can do anonymous 360-degree type surveys, but they don't compare with the immediate benefits of running a session where each member of the team gives feedback to all the other members and in turn receives feedback from them too, in a live, real-time situation. And by getting into the habit of doing this 3 or 4 times a year at regular intervals, the learning cycle will spin faster. You'll make more rapid progress and will deepen the level of trust on the team. Okay, so if you want to facilitate a group feedback session with your team, let's now look at how you go about doing that. Firstly, there are some important things to remember. As soon as people know that they're about to be part of a live feedback session in a group, it's typical that they'll start to feel somewhat anxious. And in our normal working lives these days, we don't often experience situations where we receive feedback directly and altogether from those we work with. That anxiety can appear in many different ways and will relate directly to how each person usually responds to feeling some fear. Some people will pretend that they're okay with it when they're not. Others may think of reasons why they can't be there. Others may even find ingenious reasons why it's not such a good idea to do it. So in order to minimize such reactions, you need to judge very carefully when you'll let the team members know that this is what you're going to be doing, at least for the first time. After people have experienced it once and seen the benefits, things get much easier. So building from that point, you need to think carefully when and where you'll run the session. Ideally, at least the first time, you'll be away from the normal work environment. And in terms of timing, I would suggest running this session after you've been together discussing a few other topics for at least half a day. On a 2-day offsite with a team that I've not worked with before, I usually run this session at the end of the first day, knowing that we'll be together for dinner that evening and all day the next day. However, I've also known managers that I've worked with who have themselves run this session by itself without any other sessions before it and just a simple debrief afterwards. But you do need to think very carefully if you were to do it this way, as it can be quite an emotionally deep experience. As a minimum, I would arrange some sort of social function afterwards, like going out for drinks or dinner with the team. After the first time, you can probably run this session by itself with just a simple introduction before you start. You also need to think about who is going to be part of this feedback group. You want to have no more than 10 people in the group. If you have a larger group, then carefully make up 2 groups of people who know each other best and all together in each of those groups. And if it's the first time that you're doing this, I suggest that you don't run those 2 groups in parallel because you as the leader or the organizer need to be a part of each group. In order to maximize the chances of having a productive session, you need to use a very simple and safe format for people to give feedback to each other. Of course, there are many ways of doing this, but I'm going to share with you the format that I've used with hundreds of teams over the last 10 years. It's proven, it works every time, it's simple, and you could use it in a one-to-one feedback situation as well. You'll also be able to remember it easily. So here it is. There are just 2 simple sentence starters for you to remember. The first sentence starter for you and the other teams to use is the following. What I appreciate about you is. And then you say what it is that you appreciate about the other person that you're giving feedback to. This may be in relation to anything that they've done or how they have been as a member of the team. And you should give them some specific examples too. The second sentence starter for you and the other team members to use is this. And I feel you could be even more effective if. And then you say what it is you feel that they could do to be even more effective going forward. Again, be specific and give some examples. Now, as you can guess, this second piece of the feedback is where you need to be as clear and specific and direct and honest as you possibly can be with the person that you're giving feedback to. And of course, this is where some people may try and avoid being those things because they don't want to offend the other person or they're worried about what the other person will think of them. But in my experience, if you set this up well, then people will be open and they'll be direct and honest and great value will be gained in the process. These sentence starters have been tried and tested for many, many years and have been proven to work very well. Notice the words in them: appreciate, even more effective. They're designed to be completely non-judgmental and therefore very unlikely to cause offense. They're neutral. Because they're so simple, you'll remember them and you can use them in just about any setting that you can think of. You could add a context to them if you wanted to. For example, you could say, in the last quarter, what I've appreciated about you is. And in the next quarter, I feel you could be even more effective if... ... Okay, so getting back to your planning for the session, you've thought carefully about the timing of doing this session, you've thought about the venue, you've invited the right number of people and the right people. You've ensured that there will at least be some sort of debriefing or socializing type of session afterwards. And now I've given you a simple format to use. You're prepared. And now everybody has arrived and sat down in the circle of chairs that you've set up. Notice I said circle of chairs. Don't do this with any tables between anyone, as this is not really a normal meeting and tables just get in the way of people being open to giving and receiving quality feedback. Here are the steps that you can take to run the process. Step 1. Explain the purpose of the session and remind everyone about the benefits of feedback. Then explain how the process will work. When you're explaining how the process will work, I suggest that somewhere in the room that you're using, you have those 2 simple sentence starters written out so everyone can see them. 1 sentence starter on each of those 2 flip charts is ideal, but you could use some sort of marker board or even a PowerPoint slide if you really had to. Step 2, give everyone the simple preparation handout that you can download in advance from the link next to this video and make copies of. Ask them to complete the form by writing the names of everyone in the group, starting with the person to their left, down the left-hand column of that handout. Then in columns 2 and 3, they need to think about each person on their list and make a few notes about the feedback that they would like to give to each of those people. Column 2 is about what they appreciate about that person, and column 3 is about what they feel the person could do to be even more effective. As you explain this to the group, ask them to think of specific examples to illustrate the feedback that they give. And ask them not to write down or just give generic and unspecific feedback. An example of this could be, I feel you could be even more effective if we met up more to get to know each other better. This type of feedback isn't very useful, and it's usually given because someone finds it hard to give direct feedback about what they really think about the other person. So this preparation phase should take about 10 minutes and should be done in silence. Don't let people start talking, as this will just distract everyone else from thinking carefully about what they want to say. Another thing to remember here, some people may say that they don't know another person well enough to give them feedback. They will try to use this excuse not to give feedback. So you can preempt this by saying something like the following. Even if you feel that you don't know someone that well, you can still give them feedback, even if it's just your first impressions about the other person. There is always something that we can say to offer feedback. Remember, part of this is about us getting skilled at observing our teammates and offering them feedback. Saying something like that usually helps to get around these type of comments. This type of resistance will lessen considerably when the team gets into the habit of doing this process every 3 or 4 months. Step 3 then. Once everyone has completed their preparation handout, then you're ready to start. So ask who wants to receive their feedback first and then get started. The person immediately to their left is the person to start giving feedback first, and then you work around the circle in a clockwise direction. I suggest that you do all of the appreciative feedback first, i.e. everyone gives their appreciative feedback, and then you go around the circle again with everybody giving their more effective type feedback. Doing it this way means the person receiving their feedback can maintain one emotional state for each of those rounds of feedback. As the feedback is being given, I suggest the person sitting to the receiver's right is the person to make notes for the person receiving feedback, i.e. that person writes down the main points that each person says to the person receiving the feedback. This means that that person can receive the feedback, they can just focus on listening, and they'll also have a record of their feedback later. After each person has given their feedback to the receiver just says, "Thank you." There's no clarification or questioning or dialogue at this point. You must be quite strict about this, otherwise the process could degenerate into a dialogue and people could get defensive. If people try to clarify things, just remind them that they can get as much clarification as they need after the session is finished on a one-to-one basis. When the first person has received both rounds of their feedback, the process then just moves to the person immediately to their left, and you start going round again, with the person to their left giving them appreciative feedback first, and so on. The person who's just previously received their feedback then becomes the note taker for the next person receiving their feedback. This last point is important because that person who's just received their feedback is very likely to be in quite a deep and reflective state. I found it useful for them to do something quite intellectual and task-focused so that they're immediately pulled out of that state and they can be present for the next person to receive their feedback. If this doesn't happen, they may remain quite inwardly focused for some time and unable to be of best service to the people who remain to receive feedback. And so you continue the process, moving from one person to the next until each person has received their feedback from everybody else in the circle. And then the process is finished. And you can ask how everyone felt during the session and what value they got from it. So to summarize then, getting your team into the habit of giving and receiving feedback is an essential part of becoming a high-performing team. Running a group feedback session, in the way that I've described, 3 or 4 times a year will speed up learning, it will increase trust, and it will improve performance. Remember to set your group feedback session up for success. The right people in the right place at the best time possible using the simple format that I've shown you. Facilitate the session in quite a simple, positive, and a little controlled way. This will have people feel safe and comfortable with it. And debrief the process afterwards to learn how people felt about doing it. And that's all you need to know.